Don't overlook your nickels. Some are worth much more than 5 cents. The 1947, 1964, and 1982 Jefferson nickels can be valuable if they have rare mint marks, special varieties, or minting errors. Collectors pay big money, sometimes hundreds or even thousands of dollars, for these coins. Check your nickels carefully. You might be holding treasure in your change. The Jefferson nickel is one of the most recognizable coins in American history, and among its many minting years, the 1947 issue has become a fascinating study for collectors, especially when it comes to its errors and varieties. At first glance, a 1947 nickel might seem like nothing more than a common 5-cent piece. But the truth is that hidden among the millions struck that year are mistakes made at the U.S. Mint that transformed ordinary coins into highly desirable treasures. Some of these 1947 Jefferson nickel errors have sold for hundreds and even thousands of dollars, making them not just small pieces of metal but miniature stories of history, accidents, and value. To fully appreciate the 1947 Jefferson nickel error coins, one must first understand the background of the Jefferson nickel itself. Introduced in 1938, the coin replaced the Buffalo nickel, which had been in circulation for 25 years. The design of the new nickel came from Felix Schlag, who won a public competition. His design placed a left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, with the inscriptions "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date. The reverse showcased Jefferson's famous home, Monticello, with the inscriptions "E Pluribus Unum," "United States of America," "Monticello," and 5 cents. Schlag's design, simple yet elegant, endured for decades and is still beloved by collectors today. BY 1947. The Jefferson nickel had already played a role in one of the most unusual chapters in American coinage, the war nickels. From mid-1942 through 1945, nickel was removed from the composition of 5-cent coins to save the metal for the war effort. Instead, the mint used a mix of copper, silver, and manganese. These coins are instantly recognizable because they feature large mint marks above Monticello. But in 1946, with the war over, the mint returned to the traditional copper-nickel composition, and the 1947 nickel was one of the first full peacetime issues of the series. The 1947 nickels were produced at 3 mints: Philadelphia, no mint mark; Denver, D mint mark; and San Francisco, S mint mark. Altogether, over 134 million nickels were struck that year, with Philadelphia accounting for the largest share. Most of these circulated heavily, becoming worn down in everyday commerce. But what sets 1947 apart in the eyes of collectors today are the errors and die varieties that slipped through the mint's careful processes. One of the most famous categories of 1947 Jefferson nickel errors is the double die. Double die errors occur when the die itself receives multiple misaligned impressions during the hubbing process, causing parts of the design to appear doubled on the finished coins. On the 1947 nickel, examples of doubling can be found on the obverse inscriptions, particularly the word "Liberty" and sometimes the date. While not as dramatic as the famous double dies of the Lincoln Cent series, these 1947 nickels are still highly prized by collectors. Depending on the strength of the doubling and the coin's condition, values can range from $50 for minor doubling to several $100s for strong, dramatic examples. Another error type often seen in 1947 nickels is the die crack. Over time, minting dies wear out and can develop small cracks. When coins are struck with these flawed dies, raised lines of metal appear on the finished coin. While minor die cracks are common and generally add only modest value, dramatic die breaks, sometimes called cuds, can be very collectible. A 1947 nickel with a large cud covering part of Monticello, for instance, could bring $100 or more, depending on eye appeal. Off-center strikes are another major error found among 1947 nickels. These occur when the planchet or blank coin is not properly seated in the collar during striking. The result is a coin where the design is shifted to one side, often leaving part of the coin blank. Collectors love these errors, especially when the date remains visible. A 1947 nickel struck 50% off-center, with a clear date and mint mark, could easily sell for $200 to $500. Smaller off-center errors, like 5% or 10%, are more common and generally sell for $50 to $100. Broad strike errors also exist for the 1947 nickel. In this type of error, The retaining collar that normally keeps the coin's diameter in check fails during striking, causing the coin to spread outward. The design may appear stretched or slightly flattened, and the edges will lack the usual rim. A broad-struck 1947 nickel, particularly one in high grade, can sell for $75 to $150. Clipped planchets are another striking variety. When the sheet of metal used for making blanks is misfed into the punching machine, it can create blanks with missing sections, often shaped like crescents. These errors are visually distinctive and immediately catch a collector's eye. A 1947 Jefferson nickel with a dramatic curved clip can bring $50 to $200, depending on the size of the clip and the coin's overall condition. Transitional or wrong planchet errors are among the rarest and most valuable types for the 1947 nickel. These occur when a coin is struck on a blank intended for another denomination or even a foreign coin. For example, a Jefferson nickel struck on a cent planchet would be smaller and reddish in color, while one struck on a dime planchet would be thinner. Such dramatic mistakes can sell for thousands of dollars, especially when authenticated by grading services. While examples are very scarce, collectors continue to dream of finding one in an old jar of coins. Die clashes are also known from 1947 nickels. A die clash occurs when the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet in between, transferring part of one design onto the opposite die. Coins struck afterward will show faint impressions of the opposite design in unusual places. A clashed 1947 nickel might show parts of Monticello faintly appearing on Jefferson's portrait. These errors, while subtle, are popular among specialists and can sell for $25 to $75 or more depending on severity. Auction records reveal just how valuable some of these errors can be. For example, a 1947 D nickel with a dramatic off-center strike and bold details sold for more than $400 at auction. Another 1947 S nickel with a broad strike error realized over $150. And in the realm of condition rarity, a regular 1947 nickel graded MS-67 full steps by PCGS sold for well over $1,500, proving that even non-error coins from this year can achieve incredible prices when in top condition. The concept of full steps is important when discussing Jefferson nickels. On the reverse of the coin, the steps leading up to Monticello are notoriously difficult to strike fully. Collectors prize coins that show all 6 steps clearly and without wear. The 1947 nickel is no exception. A 1947 coin with sharp full steps, particularly from Denver or San Francisco, can be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Add an error on top of that and the value multiplies. What makes the 1947 Jefferson nickel error coin so appealing is not just their rarity or monetary value, but their role as a reminder of the human and mechanical imperfections in the minting process. Despite the mint's best efforts, mistakes slip through, and those mistakes become treasures for collectors decades later. For collectors, searching for these 1947 nickel errors is a thrilling experience. Many people still have old coin jars or inherited collections that contain coins from the 1940s. The idea that one of those common-looking nickels could turn out to be a valuable double die, an off-center strike, or a clipped planchet keeps the hobby alive and exciting. In the end, the story of the 1947 Jefferson nickel is one of transformation. What was once an ordinary coin worth 5 cents has, in some cases, become a prized collectible worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. Whether through double dies, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or simply exceptional condition, these nickels prove that every coin has a story, and sometimes that story is worth far more than the number stamped on its face. So the next time you come across a 1947 Jefferson nickel, don't dismiss it as just pocket change. Examine it carefully. Look for doubling on the letters. Inspect Monticello for die cracks. Check the edges for clips, and make sure the design is centered. Because hidden in those tiny details may be the difference between a 5-cent coin and a numismatic treasure worth a collector's fortune. The 1964 Jefferson nickel may appear to most people as nothing more than a simple 5-cent piece, an ordinary coin that millions of Americans once carried in their pockets for bus fares, candy, and small purchases. But to collectors, enthusiasts, and error hunters, the 1964 Jefferson nickel represents something far more fascinating. This coin, minted in massive numbers during a pivotal time in U.S. coinage history, has gained notoriety for being one of the most widely hoarded coins of the modern era. And buried among those countless examples are rare minting errors and varieties that can transform a simple nickel into a highly valuable collector's treasure worth hundreds, thousands, and sometimes even more. To understand why the 1964 Jefferson nickel holds such a place in numismatic history, we need to take a step back to the 1960s. At the time, the United States Mint was facing a severe coin shortage. People were pulling silver coins, dimes, quarters, and half dollars out of circulation in anticipation of rising silver prices. This shortage caused panic across the country, and the mint responded by striking massive numbers of coins, particularly nickels. In 1964 alone, over 2.8 billion Jefferson nickels were produced at the Philadelphia and Denver mints combined. This staggering mintage makes 1964 one of the most common years for nickels, and it also marks the last year the date appeared without a mint mark change. Because of this immense production, many coins were struck in haste, quality control was stretched thin, and errors were far more likely to occur. And that's where the story becomes exciting, because the very flaws that most people overlook can turn a coin that seems common into a rare and desirable collectible. One of the most famous error varieties for the 1964 Jefferson nickel is the double die. Double dies occur when the die itself, which is used to strike coins, is improperly hubbed, resulting in a doubling of the design elements. For the 1964 nickel, collectors have identified double dies on both the obverse and the reverse. On some coins, doubling can be seen on Jefferson's eye, the inscriptions "Liberty" and "In God We Trust," and on the date itself. On the reverse, some double dies show doubling on the steps of Monticello and the inscriptions "E Pluribus Unum" and "Monticello." These varieties are highly collectible, with values ranging from $50 for minor doubling in circulated condition to several $100s for strong, bold examples in uncirculated grades. Another fascinating error seen on 1964 nickels is the repunched mint mark (RPM). Because mint marks in that era were still punched into the dies by hand, small misplacements and overlaps occurred. As a result, some 1964 D nickels display a D mint mark that was punched more than once, often at a slightly different angle or position. These repunched mint marks are treasured by collectors of Jefferson nickel varieties. Depending on the clarity of the repunching and the coin's condition, values can range from $25 to several $100s. Off-center strikes are another eye-catching error that exists for 1964 nickels. These occur when the coin blank is not properly centered between the dies during striking, resulting in part of the design being missing. Slight off-centers of 5 to 10% may only bring modest premiums of $20 to $40, but dramatic examples where 50% or more of the design is missing, yet the date remains visible, can sell for hundreds of dollars. The more dramatic and unusual the off-center, the higher the value. Clipped planchets are yet another intriguing type of error. When blank planchets are cut from the strip of metal used to make coins, the punches sometimes overlap or hit improperly, creating blanks that are missing a portion of their edge. These appear as crescent-shaped clips on the coin. A 1964 nickel with a clipped planchet might bring $25 to $100, depending on the size and severity of the clip. Collectors particularly prize double or triple clipped planchets, as they are far scarcer and visually striking. Perhaps the rarest and most exciting errors for 1964 nickels are wrong planchet strikes. This occurs when a nickel is accidentally struck on a blank meant for another denomination, such as a cent, dime, or even a foreign coin. For example, a 1964 nickel struck on a copper cent planchet would be noticeably smaller, lighter, and red-colored instead of silver-gray. A wrong planchet error of this type could easily fetch several $1,000s at auction. In fact, there are recorded sales of Jefferson nickels from other years with similar wrong planchet errors selling for $5,000 to $10,000 or more. If a dramatic 1964 wrong planchet example were discovered, it could very well reach similar levels. Die breaks, die cracks, and cuds are another category of errors that appear on 1964 nickels. These happen when the dies used to strike the coins develop fractures or pieces break off entirely. A small die crack running across Jefferson's portrait may only add $10 to $20 in value, but a large cud, where part of the die has broken away, leaving a raised blob of metal on the coin, can command $100 to $300 or more. Because each cud is unique, collectors often treat them like one-of-a-kind artworks of the minting process, It's also important to note that 1964 nickels have another element that adds to their collectability: the full steps designation. On the reverse of the coin, Monticello is depicted with steps at the base. These steps often strike weakly, but coins that show 5 or 6 sharp, complete steps are far rarer and more valuable. While this is not an error in itself, the combination of an error coin with full steps detail could create an extraordinarily valuable specimen. For example, a 1964 nickel error graded MS66 with full steps could easily bring thousands of dollars at auction, simply because so few exist in such high condition. Auction records provide us with real-world proof of just how valuable 1964 nickel errors can be. For instance, dramatic off-center strikes in mint state condition have sold for $300 to $500. Repunched mint marks in pristine condition have brought similar amounts. Even minor errors in high grades attract strong interest, because collectors are always seeking out the best possible examples of a given variety. The biggest prizes, of course, are reserved for major wrong planchet errors and dramatic double dies, which are so scarce that they create excitement whenever they appear on the market. The market for error coins has only grown stronger in recent years. Social media, coin forums, and news outlets frequently highlight stories of ordinary people discovering valuable coins in their pocket change. This has inspired countless individuals to begin checking their coins more carefully. The 1964 nickel, being one of the most common coins of its era, often shows up in these searches. And while most examples are worth just 5 cents, the rare error varieties remind us that treasure can be hiding in plain sight. For collectors, the 1964 Jefferson nickel is an irresistible challenge. With its massive mintage, wide range of varieties, and abundance of errors, it offers endless possibilities for study and discovery. Building a complete set of 1964 nickel errors could take years, requiring off-center strikes, clipped planchets, double dies, repunched mint marks, die cracks, cuds, and perhaps even a wrong planchet strike. Each piece would tell its own unique story of how mistakes slip through even the best efforts of the mint. The enduring lesson of the 1964 Jefferson nickel is that rarity is not always about how many coins were minted, but about how unusual a particular variety or error is. Even in a year that saw billions of nickels struck, the rare mistakes are the ones collectors will always chase. And it's that chase, the possibility of finding something extraordinary among the ordinary, that makes coin collecting such a rewarding and timeless pursuit. So the next time you come across a 1964 Jefferson nickel in your change, don't dismiss it as just another old coin. Look closely. Inspect the date, the mint mark, the lettering, the steps of Monticello, the edges, and the overall strike. Any unusual doubling, misplacement, missing detail, or abnormal shape could mean you're holding something rare and valuable. What looks like a simple nickel could actually be a piece of history worth far more than 5 cents. The 1964 Jefferson nickel error coins remind us of an important truth. Even in a sea of billions, the rare and unusual stand out, carrying with them stories of the mint, the era, and the excitement of discovery. And sometimes, those small mistakes are what make the biggest treasures. The 1982 Jefferson nickel may look like an ordinary 5-cent piece to most people, something they toss into a jar at the end of the day or use in a vending machine without a second thought. But for collectors and numismatic enthusiasts, the 1982 Jefferson nickel has proven to be a fascinating year filled with unique error coins that turn this humble 5-cent piece into something far more valuable. While billions of nickels have been minted and circulated over the years, it's the mistakes, those rare minting errors, that transform an otherwise ordinary coin into a collector's prize capable of selling for hundreds or even thousands of dollars. To appreciate why the 1982 Jefferson nickel is so exciting, we need to first understand the coin itself. The Jefferson nickel was introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel. Felix Schlag's design features a left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, with inscriptions "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the year of mintage. On the reverse is Jefferson's Virginia home, Monticello, along with the inscriptions "E Pluribus Unum," "United States of America," and 5 cents. This design remained largely unchanged for decades, making it one of the longest-running coin designs in U.S. history. By 1982, Jefferson nickels were being struck at the Philadelphia and Denver mints, with circulation strikes produced in huge quantities. The U.S. Mint was using modern equipment to reduce mistakes, but errors still slipped through. And those errors are exactly what collectors chase today. One of the most recognizable errors from the 1982 nickel is the off-center strike. This occurs when the blank planchet isn't properly aligned in the press, causing the design to be stamped off balance. A slight off-center strike might only shift the design a little, but dramatic examples where 40% to 70% of the design is missing are highly desirable, especially if the date is still visible. Collectors will pay far more for those, sometimes over $800 to $1,200 in top condition. A 1982 Jefferson nickel struck 60% off-center with a clear date once sold at auction for nearly $1,000. Another prized error is the broad strike. When the collar that normally holds the coin in place during striking malfunctions or is absent, the coin spreads out wider than normal, losing its reeded edge. A broad-struck 1982 nickel looks stretched and unusual, which makes it stand out immediately. Depending on grade and severity, these errors can sell for several $100s, with gem examples reaching over $700 at auction. Clipped planchets are another variety found in 1982 nickels. This happens when a blank planchet is punched too close to the edge of the metal strip, creating a coin with a curved bite missing. Single clips might bring $100 to $200, while dramatic double or triple clips are much rarer and can exceed $500. These types of errors are not only valuable but visually striking, making them popular among collectors. One of the rarest and most exciting errors from 1982 nickels involves wrong planchet strikes. Imagine a Jefferson nickel struck not on its standard copper-nickel blank, but on a planchet meant for another denomination. A known example of a 1982 nickel struck on a cent planchet has sold for over $2,000, while those struck on foreign planchets can fetch even higher sums. These errors are rare because quality control at the mint typically catches such mistakes, but when they slip through, they're highly prized. Another category is the double die error, which happens when the die used to strike the coin has doubling in its design elements. On the 1982 nickel, reports of doubling can be seen in areas like Liberty, the date, or the Monticello lettering on the reverse. Collectors go wild for strong double dies, and depending on grade and clarity, they can sell from $250 to over $1,000. In fact, some examples graded MS65 or higher have been valued near $1,500. One particularly fascinating error involves die cracks and cuds. A cud forms when part of the die breaks away, leaving a raised blob of metal on the coin. 1982 nickels with large cuds near Monticello or on Jefferson's profile are unusual and collectible. While minor die cracks may only fetch $20 to $50, large dramatic cuds can reach several $100s. Collectors love these because each cud is unique, almost like a fingerprint of the minting process. Auction results provide some of the most thrilling stories about 1982 Jefferson nickel errors. For example, in 2018, a 1982 nickel struck off-center by more than 50% with full visible date sold for nearly $900. Around the same time, a broad-struck 1982 nickel in mint state condition brought over $600. But the most dramatic was a 1982 nickel struck on a 1-cent planchet, which sold for more than $2,500 at a major coin auction. These stories fuel collectors' imaginations, proving that even pocket change can hide treasures. What makes these coins so exciting is their accessibility. Unlike older rarities, which are often out of reach for beginners, error nickels from years like 1982 can still occasionally be found in circulation, in coin rolls, or in inherited collections. This means anyone with patience and a keen eye has a chance of discovering one. That thrill, the possibility of finding a valuable error in your everyday change, is what drives so many people to search. Collectors emphasize the importance of examining 1982 nickels carefully. A jeweler's loupe or magnifying glass can help detect subtle doubling or tiny planchet clips. Measuring the weight of the coin can reveal wrong planchet strikes, as a nickel struck on a cent planchet will weigh less. Edges should also be inspected. If the edge looks smooth or stretched, it could indicate a broad strike. Even small details can make the difference between a common coin and a treasure worth hundreds or thousands. Another reason 1982 nickels are so important is that they reflect a transitional time in U.S. coinage history. The early 1980s saw challenges with inflation, rising metal costs, and changes in minting technology. Although nickels didn't undergo a major composition change that year like cents did, The sheer volume of coins produced meant that even a tiny percentage of errors translated into a decent number of collectible pieces. Today, those survivors are highly sought after because they represent both history and rarity. Over time, values for these error coins have steadily increased. As more collectors enter the hobby, demand continues to grow. A dramatic error that might have sold for $300 2 decades ago could easily bring $800 or more today. Experts believe that as error coins gain more mainstream attention, prices for 1982 Jefferson nickel errors will only climb higher. Imagine walking into a coin shop or browsing an online auction and spotting a 1982 nickel with an obvious clip or off-center strike. To the average person, it might look like damage, but to a collector, it's a prize. That moment of recognition, the thrill of knowing you've found something special, is what makes coin collecting such a rewarding pursuit. In the world of numismatics, stories of discovery always spark interest. There are tales of collectors who bought bulk rolls of nickels only to discover a rare 1982 broadstrike hidden inside. Others have found off-center or double-die 1982 nickels in pocket change and later sold them for hundreds of dollars. These real-world examples prove that anyone could stumble upon one of these treasures, so the next time you come across a 1982 Jefferson nickel, don't dismiss it as just another 5-cent coin. Hold it up to the light. Look closely at the rims, the inscriptions, the overall alignment. Does the design look shifted? Is there doubling in the lettering? Is part of the coin missing or oddly shaped? If so, you might be holding a rare error coin worth far more than face value. Auction houses have already demonstrated that 1982 nickel errors can command serious money. $600 for broad strikes, nearly $1,000 for off-center strikes, and several thousand for wrong planchet errors. These sales remind us that hidden treasures are out there, waiting to be found. The 1982 Jefferson nickel, though common at first glance, is a perfect example of how small mistakes can lead to big rewards. It teaches us that even in a world of mass production and modern technology, imperfection can slip through, and it's those imperfections that collectors cherish most. For anyone willing to look closely, a simple 5-cent piece from 1982 could turn into a prized possession, or even a life-changing discovery.